It's 6 p.m. on Monday here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Hwang Ji-hye. And these are the top stories we're following at this hour. Korea's defense minister says Seoul has final authority on deployment of foreign troops on the peninsula, easing concerns over Japan's recent passage of security bills. Major financial institutions expect the Korean economy to grow a little over 2% this year, slowing from its over 3% growth in 2014. Internal strife within the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy looks to be settling down, at least for now, as its chairman Moon Jae-in calls off a vote of confidence on his leadership. After the recent passing of Tokyo's controversial security bills, South Korea has reiterated its stance that Seoul must approve any deployment of Japan's self-defense forces on the peninsula, even during wartime. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
South Korea's defense minister Han Min-koo said on Monday that Seoul has the final authority to reject any U.S. request to deploy Japan's self-defense forces on Korean soil during wartime. During a parliamentary inspection at the Ministry of National Defense in Seoul, Han stressed that despite the U.S. having wartime operational control in the event of war, South Korea's president has supreme command and must give permission for overseas troops to fight on Korean soil. In a related matter, Japan's new security policy will be front and center of defense talks next month, involving South Korea, the United States, and Japan. A government official in Seoul says the three countries will discuss follow-up measures after Japan lays out the details of the changes to its policy. The date and location of the meeting are yet to be confirmed, but it's expected talks will be held before the annual Korea-U.S. Security Consultative meeting scheduled for mid-October. Seoul plans to reiterate a stance that Japan will not be allowed to dispatch troops to the Korean peninsula in an emergency situation without the Korean government's prior consent. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, South Korea and Japan are reportedly pushing for a foreign ministers' meeting this month. A diplomatic source said Monday that the two countries are fine-tuning details for the meeting, likely to take place on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly session in New York. If the meeting does take place, it will come ahead of the trilateral summit involving South Korea, China, and Japan, expected for October or November in Seoul. Speculation is that the respective foreign ministers will coordinate details for a meeting between South Korean President Park Geun-hye and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. The wave of discontent is growing in Japan over the passage of the controversial security bills. Faced with plunging approval ratings at home, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will seek support from an international audience in the coming days. Our Son Jung-in has more.
Tokyo-based public broadcaster NHK reports that some 170 scholars from more than 140 Japanese universities held a news conference on Sunday. Calling it an outrageous act of abandoning Japan's pacifist constitution, the group urged lawmakers to immediately scrap the new security bills that were passed by the upper house of the Diet the previous day. They declared an all-out movement for new democracy, which they said had just begun. On the same day, activists continued to rally in front of the Diet building in Tokyo. They are deeply opposed to the bills that allow Japan to send its military into overseas conflicts to defend allies, even if the country itself is not under attack. The approval rating for Abe's cabinet dropped below 39% right after Japan's nationalist leader pushed through the legislation despite fierce opposition. A poll conducted by Kyodo News Agency over the weekend showed the cabinet's approval rating dropped 4.3 percentage points from the previous poll in mid-August, while the cabinet's disapproval rate spiked to over 50%. The survey also showed a majority of respondents were opposed to the bills, with nearly 80% saying there were not enough deliberations in the Diet. Abe will attempt to earn support from the new legislation at the UN General Assembly. Sources say he plans to win understanding from the international community during a speech next week. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Despite recent speculation surrounding a possible North Korean nuclear test, satellite images taken earlier this month showed no signs of activity. The U.S.-based website 38 North says there have been no changes at the Punggye-ri nuclear test site since August. It added that the West Portals, the site of nuclear tests held in 2009 and 2013, experienced little or no activity since the beginning of this year. But 2 new buildings have been constructed at the entrance, likely used to support guards controlling access to the area. It's one of the most highly anticipated meetings of this year. The leaders of the world's 2 superpowers will sit down in Washington this week. Plenty of issues will be tabled, including how they handle an unpredictable North Korea. Han-dao reports on the possible scenarios.
As far as state visits go, it doesn't get much bigger than Chinese President Xi Jinping's trip to Washington this week. With President Xi and U.S. President Barack Obama set to hold summit talks at the White House on Friday local time, observers are watching how they broach the issues of China's militarization of the South China Sea and its alleged cyber attacks on the U.S. It's this backdrop that led a professor at Princeton University to say the atmosphere at the summit could be the coldest it's been in decades. Despite their differences, Washington and Beijing share some common ground, and that includes North Korea. Political watchers say the 2 sides are likely to send a clear message to North Korea over its nuclear and missile programs. They say a tangible outcome could be reached if the 2 sides meet halfway. Currently, Washington maintains a hardline policy of deterrence and sanctions against North Korea, while China plays a kind of big brother role, seeking to persuade the regime to abide by its international obligations. Experts add that a joint statement expected shortly after the summit will give the world a clearer view of China's North Korea policy, which has grown more ambiguous since Kim Jong-un came to power. Watchers say the best outcome as far as North Korea issues are concerned would be that Obama and Xi can coax Pyongyang back to the negotiating table and find a breakthrough in the 6-party nuclear talks that have been stalled since 2008. Han-daeun, Arirang News.
In a move intended to end internal strife gripping Korea's main opposition party, the New Politics Alliance for Democracy confirmed confidence in the leadership of Moon Jae-in. However, as our Ji Myung-gil reports, it may end up having the opposite effect.
NPAD's chief Moon Jae-in withdrew his plan to put his leadership to a vote on Monday, a move he insisted upon after party lawmakers expressed their dissatisfaction with his leadership style. The NPAD spokesperson Kim Sung-soo read a message on behalf of Moon.
I will be open-minded and accept sincere advice. I will take full responsibility to reform and unite our party and give my utmost effort for victory in the upcoming general elections.
Despite Moon's decision to withdraw a confidence vote to focus on uniting the party, members of the minority faction still oppose the new set of reform plans on the candidate nomination process, adopted last week ahead of next year's general elections. The NPAD is embroiled in an ongoing spat between the mainstream members loyal to the late former President Roh Moo-hyun and led by Moon, and the minority non-mainstream members. Further complicating Moon's efforts to unite internal factions, NPAD defector Chun Jung-bae announced his plans to launch a new political party in January.
The new party will exclude both the extreme right and left to seek harmony on various positions. I will work with anyone who shares the values of reform to reconfigure Korean politics.
Chun said there was no future for the NPAD and that he was open to talking with incumbent politicians who shared reformist values, irrespective of their party affiliations. The announcement is worrying news for mainstream members in the NPAD, as it could lead to more party defections. The NPAD worries that such deepening division could be advantageous for the ruling Saenuri Party during next year's general elections. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Facing declining exports and sluggish domestic demand, major financial institutions expect the Korean economy to grow in the low 2% range this year. Our Kwon So-ah reports.
An almost 1 percentage point drop in the country's economic growth compared to last year is what many financial institutions are forecasting for Korea's 2015 GDP. If that holds true, it could be the worst result since 2012, when it posted a 2.3% growth. Although the average outlook from 36 global institutions stands at 2.5%, major financial services companies such as Morgan Stanley and Moody's estimate that Korea's GDP growth will only reach 2.3%. Nomura Securities and IHS Economics forecast 2.2% growth and DKB 2.1%. One of the biggest culprits behind Korea's slowing growth is sluggish exports, which have posted negative results for 8 straight months this year.
We already saw a less than 2.5% growth in the first half of the year. But in the second half, there are even more factors of concern, especially expectations of a U.S. interest rate hike, plus risks stemming from the slowing Chinese economy.
In the longer run, domestic institutions have also downgraded a longer-term potential growth rate. LG Research Institute estimates Korea's GDP will grow by an average 1.7% between 2020 and 2030.
As the world economy shifts from a manufacturing-based to a more service-orientated one, and with developing countries such as China advancing in terms of technology, it has become much more difficult to improve productivity.
When factoring in Korea's aging population, a downward trend in the workforce population is expected to begin within the next 2 years, which is why experts stress the need for next-generation growth engines to be discovered as soon as possible. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
After its fall from grace in the U.S. market for cheating emission standards, Volkswagen may be facing disciplinary measures in Korea. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency announced last week that the German automaker had programmed almost 500,000 cars to circumvent U.S. government emissions tests, allowing them to emit pollutants over 40 times the legal limit. These cars have since been recalled, and the company has halted sales of Volkswagen and Audi models equipped with 4-cylinder turbo diesel engines. The Korean government plans to launch investigations into emission levels of the affected models. The Syriza party has secured a dramatic victory in Greece's snap general election. Alexis Tsipras, speaking after his party's 5th general election victory in 6 years, vowed to rid the government of corruption and pledged a new phase of stability. Connie Kim reports.
Greek leftist Alexis Tsipras declared victory in Sunday's snap general election, claiming a clear mandate to recover Greece's stumbling economy. The left-wing Syriza party emerged as a winner, taking 35.5% of the votes, with the conservative New Democracy trailing with 28.1%. Tsipras vowed to root out corruption and pledged efforts to create stability.
It was a difficult battle, and I feel vindicated today because the Greek people gave us a clear mandate to continue fighting inside and outside the country and boost our people's pride.
The general election results give Syriza 145 seats in the 300-member parliament and New Democracy 75 seats. Syriza had formed a coalition with the independent Greeks, with the two parties on course to secure 155 seats, a majority in parliament. Tsipras made no specific comments on the €85 billion bailout agreed to in July, but the left-wing party did pledge to implement the bailout program due for review next month. Tsipras will have to persuade European Union lenders that sufficient steps have been made to ensure the next payment. The snap election came after Tsipras was forced to back down from his post as European leaders refused to write off Greece's debt and roll back austerity measures. Despite the results, the International Monetary Fund says Greece needs a substantial debt relief. Greece's GDP is forecast to shrink 2.3% this year and by 1.3% in 2016. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Online cartoon series known in Korea as webtoons are really popular here and have even provided the stories for hit TV series and movies. Blurring the lines between the various platforms even further, one webtoon is making the leap from cyberspace to musical stage. Our Kim Ji-yeon has the details.
Chang Seonji's dream is to find a job at a conglomerate, while Qing-yan repeatedly fails the exam to become a public servant. These characters in Unlimited Power reflect the harsh realities of youth unemployment in Korea. However, the story of their struggles is not something new. The characters have been winning the hearts of online viewers for years. Unlimited Power first appeared on a portal site 7 years ago as a webtoon. By 2013, it was so popular that it was made into 15-minute mini dramas, aired through internet casts and mobile services. And this month, the story has come to life as a musical.
Most people watching musicals are from the younger generation, so they are familiar with webtoons. There's a good chance they'll watch the musical if they know the story from the internet.
But the mix of platforms is not a one-way trend. Popular musicals are being made into webtoons as well. Pungorju, which tells the tale of a Korean man geisha during the Syriza dynasty, will make its webtoon debut next month, some 3 years after it hit musical theaters in Korea. Kim Jeong, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of our newscast. More updates coming up at 10 p.m. Korea time, so stay tuned and goodbye for now.